With this being the fourth episode of It's Pony that I've watched, this episode, School Dance, which is the Valentine's Day episode of this show, is the weakest episode. Not because it's the weakest holiday episode compared to the other holiday episodes that I've talked about, mainly the beach episode, the Christmas episode, and the Halloween episode. This episode really feels like false advertising. And the fact that this episode is 11 minutes long, it really gave me the impression that this episode's length should have been like the Halloween and Christmas episodes where they were 22 minutes. And the issue that I have with the episode is mainly the fact that with the characters not wanting to go to the dance because they don't like the Valentine's Day dance, and the only way to cancel it is for the principal of the school to search for love, since that she never searched for love, which for school teachers slash principals, it's realistic. But truthfully, Annie and Pony in this episode, in comparison to previous episodes that I have watched, this was the weakest. I'm not saying that this episode is bad, even as a Valentine's Day episode, but at the same time, this episode would have been better off if it was 22 minutes longer, while having better execution rather than having a rushed revelation towards the end. The plot of this episode is that Principal Romano is preparing for a school dance that everyone can't stand because they don't want to be part of it, so Annie and Pony need to find someone else that Principal Romano will fall in love, to the point where she'll cancel the school dance. They found the perfect person for Principal Romano, Mr. Garvlax, to where they do everything that they can in order to have these two be together for the sake of canceling the school dance. Truth be told, I've seen these types of plots happen even from the Loud Tales, but truthfully, what the Loud Tales did with its episode's plot involving the teacher falling in love with another teacher, even though that the other teacher isn't like Mr. Garvlax when it comes to working outside of the school, since that he's not employed at the school. In fact, the Cross-Agantes episode did a much more better job, considering they know how to flesh out the characters a lot more. And I'm not saying that the characters in this episode isn't fleshed out, since that this is the fourth episode I've seen involving these characters, but what really made me bored when it came to these characters in this episode is that the pacing is really slow. In comparison to previous It's Ponies episodes that I've seen, the pacing was alright. Granted, the goal of this episode is to cancel the school dances that Annie and her friends don't like it. And as much as I try to understand the motivations in the beach episode and Halloween episode were much more better, because not only were Annie's friends were main characters in that, it really gave you the impression that their motivations were a lot more explored. In this episode, however, they don't even like the school dance because they're not into love and whatnot. And the reason why I brought that up is that after Annie and Pony succeed the plan on having the school dance cancelled, Annie's friends are incredibly disappointed because they won't be able to do the other things that they would do at the school dance. Valentine's Day dance or not, Valentine's Day whatsoever, they prefer other things to do there rather than romance. And honestly, it's one thing that if you don't want your characters to be in romance, which I'm not totally against it, but when you have this rush revelation when these characters find something that they enjoy in the dance that they dislike the most, mainly Valentine's Day, and just have the last remaining minutes of having the characters trying to get the dance back in schedule, it really makes me to believe that this episode being 11 minutes is the wrong decision. Which is a shame because, unlike the Loud House and Quasagande's episodes where they at least attempt to have some kind of meaning when it comes to the main characters helping out the teachers / principals to be in a romantic relationship during the Valentine's Day season, despite the fact that those episodes didn't take place in the Valentine's Day season. For what they executed with Mr. Goblox and Principal Romando in this, it really feels left out. Granted, I didn't watch this show completely aside from the 4 episodes, including this one, but at the same time, considering that this episode is the weakest I've seen involving the last episodes I've seen, it kind of sums up a lot that the Loud House and the Quasagande's episodes involving teachers finding love or having the characters match up with someone else is a lot more better than anything in this episode. Truthfully, I don't even think that the premise of kids wanting the school dance being cancelled isn't really much of a big deal, even though it may be part of the characters of not liking romance, but it's really difficult to instantly take this episode seriously compared to the other episodes where they at least try to make conflicts a lot more important. Granted, not every single episode needs to have extreme conflicts of characters trying to prevent happening in the future, but at the same time, this episode really gave me the impression that Annie and her friends can't be able to think of the positives when they see the Valentine's dance for the first time, even though that there are multiple things to do in the dance rather than romance, which does happen in the real world, but truthfully, this isn't the Sadie Hawkins dance from My Life as a Teenage Robot. And since that we never get to see the dance itself, the false advertisement in this episode really took full force once this episode came to an end. The subplot centering around Annie's parents, where Annie's mother having a difficult time remembering something, while her father does remember when it comes to their chemistry with each other. Truth be told, it doesn't save the episode, but it's the best thing about the episode. So I can instantly tell that the slice of life material is taken in full respect when it comes to Annie's parents. Even though it's mostly me thinking about characters in Nickelodeon when they're good, but aside from Hugh and Junie Neutron from Jimmy Neutron, well, the better Nicktoons parents, at least in my knowledge, Annie's parents are possibly second place when it comes to better parents when they're not stupid or selfish. Granted, Hugh Neutron is those things, but in a way, it makes him charismatic, and when it comes to Julie Neutron, she's the opposite. But Annie's parents, when it comes to their chemistry, it really feels like that, similar to Judy and Hugh Neutron when it comes to their chemistry being close, Annie's parents are mostly the same page. Granted, they're different characters, obviously, and this show was released nearly 2 decades after Jimmy Neutron. It slowly made me see that these parents are mostly the heart and soul of the show. Granted, Annie and Pony may be the heart of the show when it comes to how they're executed, but in this episode, they're not really the heart and soul, which is really saying a lot when I say that Annie's parents in this episode is the best thing, even though it doesn't save the entire episode. So, in all honesty, this episode isn't terrible. There's a reason why that this episode isn't Cartoon Crisis 3 material, obviously, but at the same time, that doesn't automatically mean that this episode is immune to mediocreness. It's somewhat bound to happen to find an episode that is considered weak in a show that would have had potential, but this episode made me convinced that the Loud House and Quasagande's episodes involving principals slash teachers finding romance when it came to the main characters helping out does it much more better than what this episode accomplished. There was a reason why we're continuing on with this schedule with these videos, because honestly, there are only 2 Valentine's Day episodes that I'm talking about in this schedule in comparison to 14. So, in all honesty, even though that this episode isn't really the best when it comes to It's Pony, I was considering on reviewing this episode as part of last year's schedule of Valentine's Half Month 6 if I didn't cancel it, so it's best for Valentine's Half Month 6 to have 14 reviews despite the sacrifices, because I won't be able to talk about this episode in any other occasion with it being a Valentine's Day episode. But then again, this schedule really put me in a lot of stress, which is why I really need a break once this schedule comes to an end. I'm giving this episode a 5.25 out of 10.